Maybe it's the fact that I grew up a pastor's kid, or watching preachers trying to cast out demons from the possessed in Paraguay. Or maybe it's my family kept moving into haunted houses over and over again. But I've always known that there was a world beyond what we could see, whether we call it spirit, or angels, or ghosts, or simply the supernatural. My story begins when I am 3, seeing a woman sitting on the steps inside our house. And it continues to this day here in Pittsburgh, where my wife constantly asks, "Did you see that?" My name is Chiwan Choi, and this is Are You There, Ghost? It's me, Chiwan. Of course, the title is a take on one of the first books I ever read. I am a writer, and I will be speaking with other writers about their experiences with the beyond, with the paranormal, and how those experiences have impacted their work. Because what are writers if not ghost makers?
Welcome everyone to another episode of Are You There, Ghost? It's me, Chiwan. Today, I'm so happy to have a Pittsburgh-based writer and friend and drinking buddy, Michelle Renee Lane. Let me read you a little bit about her. Michelle Renee Lane holds an MFA in writing in popular fiction from Seton Hall University. She writes dark speculative fiction about identity politics and women of color battling their inner demons while falling in love with monsters. Her work includes elements of fantasy, horror, romance, and erotica. Her debut novel, Invisible Chains from 2019, was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award. Book 1 of her erotic paranormal romance series, The Courtship of Nora Fagan, was released in 2022 by Stardust Romance. Please welcome the wonderful Michelle Renee Lane. Hello, Michelle.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. It's been so long, like 2 weeks or so.
Yeah. Ages.
Before we get to anything, how's book 2 going?
I actually submitted the manuscript last week and got confirmation that the publisher has it and will start the process of editing it.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. I know
Thank
you were
you.
battling with that for a bit.
Yeah, that was a rough haul. Yeah.
Uh, What was so challenging? If you had to pick one thing that was the most challenging to you, what was it in finishing this draft?
Just battling my own brain, really. I kept putting up imaginary roadblocks for myself.
Uh-huh.
I feel like imposter syndrome was, at really high levels for some reason. And I don't know, I'm a fan of I like series of books because I like
Mhm.
getting really deep into characters and a story and settings. And so I read a lot of series as a reader.
Mhm.
So when a series is not going the way that I want it, I get kind of critical, and I feel like I was doing that to myself as I was writing. I was worried that I was going to be doing the things in this series that trouble me when I'm reading other people's series of books. And so I kept just putting the brakes on instead of just allowing the process to happen. Yeah,
Uh,
that's what I'm doing. Mhm.
I mean, was that a problem you ran into writing the first of this series?
No, because I feel like because it was the first book,
Uh-huh.
I was able to pretend that it was a standalone,
Ah, got it.
which is weird because my first novel, I kind of thought it was gonna be like that too, but I've already started working on the follow-up to that, so I guess that's gonna be a series, I guess. There will be probably 2, maybe 3 books,
Uh-huh.
um, in that series, and so this I'm gonna have to get over the idea that I'm not writing series of books because I think that's what I'm gonna be doing. There'll be standalone books probably, but I think that I get so attached to characters and places and themes that I wanna keep working on those stories.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same feeling when I'm writing. Even when I'm writing poetry, like almost like, hey, I want this narrator to stay around for a while.
Right.
So, is that scary? Is that overwhelming in a way? Like having to creating a character that you then don't want leaving you for a while.
Yeah, I guess. Because I mean, they kind of become friends in a way because they live in your brain for so long. They take up a lot of time in your waking and sleeping life, sometimes for me. Um, and there's a lot of chatter. My characters have a lot to say, whether it ends up on the page or not. They live inside me. And,
Mm.
I write horror mainly. And unfortunately, a lot of these stories are kind of autobiographical too. So yeah, it's hard to let go of some of those characters because those characters are me.
Yeah. I know people ask me sometimes whether writing something um what's the word I'm looking for? Not therapeutic, but what's the word I'm looking for?
Cathartic.
Cathartic.
Um,
See, I knew you would know it. It, it- and I have such mixed feelings about that because
yeah,
it's like, I guess, but then I'm forcing myself to revisit trauma all the time.
yeah,
So you saying it's autobiographical, how does that work for you? Does it get too much sometimes?
it does. But what's been great is that um, each time I sit down to write something, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, whether it's a short story or a novel, what's happening for me is like when I wrote Invisible Chains, which was the first novel length thing I'd ever written, um, that was really scary because I did not realize that I was channeling myself into my work. And so every time I sat down to write another chapter or scene and kept seeing myself on the page, it really freaked me out, especially since that my character goes through some really difficult things. And it's about processing trauma and living through trauma and trying to come out on the other side, knowing yourself better, maybe being a bit
Mhm.
stronger. And I think that that's kind of what I'm doing with, yeah, I don't know. It's like the process of writing. Each time I sit down, I'm realizing that I'm working through my own demons. Like
Mm.
my characters sometimes are literally dealing with literal demons, and that enables me to work through the things that um, are buried or
Yeah.
I am afraid to face otherwise. The conversations that I never have with actual people in my life sometimes come out on the page. Um, and it's making me realize that I should probably have more of those conversations with actual people, because you know it would probably be healthier
What are
at
you,
some
my therapist?
point. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um,
So what
so
makes you
yeah.
keep going back to it? Like, I mean, is the fear part of the appeal of it?
Well, I think that there's a part of me that hopes that by going through this process myself, that it might help other people figure out whatever they're going through.
Mm.
Um, I've had people say to me recently, um, after reading one of my books, that they felt seen.
Mm.
That's powerful. That matters to me. Um, I feel like if I can reach one, two, or a handful of people through my work, then I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I found my purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Is it doing is it helping you the way it helped that reader?
Yeah, weirdly enough, because when that reader told me that she felt seen, I felt seen.
By your own work.
Yeah. And
That's amazing.
so it's kind of, there was a power in that. And I don't think I ever give myself enough credit for the magic that I create sometimes. And so I'm going to keep doing it until I guess I believe it myself.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Um, was there a moment like that for you as a reader before you even started writing, where you read something and was like, I feel seen?
Mm-hmm. That's a little complicated. I feel like it took a long time for me as a reader to find that,
Hmm.
because like I made connections to characters my whole life as I was growing up. I started reading pretty young and read a lot. And so, and I read horror novels because they were available to me. They were always, that's what my family was reading. There was also a mixture of like romance and, westerns and that kind of stuff, but there was a lot of horror around the house all the time. Um, and so, it those were the things that I would pick up. And so I would read Stephen King sometimes. This is pretty young when I started reading Stephen King. But then when I was probably like 11 or 12, my mom gave me a copy of Interview with the Vampire. And I feel like that book was kind of like a gateway drug for me to
Mm,
read everything that I could get my hands on that had vampires in it. And so, I read Anne Rice. I read every vampire novel I could get my hands on. Um, and what sort of came out of that was this idea that I felt like I was an outsider most of my life.
right.
But vampires were also outsiders, but they had power and they were scary and interesting and sexy and traveled the world and um, snuck into museums late at night and did whatever they wanted to at night, and no one could stop them. And so, in some ways, I started connecting to and sympathizing with vampires.
Yeah.
Um, do I see myself in that? I don't know. I feel like what I wanted to become. Not necessarily someone who preys on others in order to live, but someone who has so much power that no one can prevent me from doing the things that I want to do. Um, so, did I feel seen? I don't know that I felt seen. I don't think I felt seen in the stuff that I was reading until I found Toni Morrison and Octavia Butler,
Mm,
because they were creating characters that were going through some really bizarre stuff that looked more like me.
right.
Um, and so that is when I feel like I started to be seen in fiction. Um, but until then, I aligned with the monsters because they lived in the margins like I lived in the margins.
Yeah. In another episode when we were talking to Lee Murray, I asked her if she is the monster, and she was like, "Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm that." And it's like, I don't know why hearing that from her made me feel all kinds of things. I mean, nothing bad, but like yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, how do you think your writing is evolving. I'm curious to see whether you've noticed something between book 2 and book 1 about you as a writer.
Um, yeah, I guess the fact that I was so self-critical, like I feel like self-criticism is always a part of life as a creative. Like that's just
Hmm.
what we do. Um, but to be really conscious of the idea that I wasn't going to create something that was going to aggravate people as they read it,
Hmm.
because I don't want my characters to do the dumb thing that everyone yells like, why would you do that? That is so stupid. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
I want to avoid that. I think maybe occasionally it's okay to do that if it's like a joke, but I don't want to write characters that you want to scream at and like shake because they're doing the dumb thing. I think it's okay for characters to make mistakes and learn through the process of whatever they're going through. But, you know, if you're going to write a character that's dating a vampire, that person should at least be self-aware enough to know that this is probably dangerous and I'm going to do it anyway. Like
Yeah.
they should be aware of that, right?
Oh my
Instead of
god.
just be like man of my dreams and I can hardly wait till we get married and whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That was my problem trying to watch the last Evil Dead movie.
Okay.
I was so busy calling that entire family names that I couldn't get into the movie because every single thing from every single character was like, for real right now.
Right. Right.
um,
It's frustrating.
yeah, yeah. As if I've had that experience before and I know the proper way to act.
Right.
um, you mentioned like how autobiographical your work is, and I'm assuming a lot of it you mean as like stand-in or metaphorical.
Mhm.
Um, but are there like things from your life that was, I don't know, maybe you went to a club and actually met a vampire? I have no idea.
Right.
But other
Um,
like paranormal things you've experienced that you've slipped into your writing?
right. Um, so how do I want to talk about that? I'll give you an example of like a real life thing that it's not necessarily paranormal, but how it influenced my work. So, for example, the vampire in my first novel, Invisible Chains, his name is Carlos Velasquez, and I knew someone by that name who was a pen pal of mine when I was like in my teens, and he was about 10 years older than me and had a kind of an unhealthy fascination with me and wrote me all kinds of inappropriate letters about how we were going to live as vampires together. Um, I this is like pre-internet days, right?
Yeah.
So I accepted his invitation and went to New York City and met him in person. Like I
From
met him in
Pittsburgh, or
person.
where were you living at the time?
I was living in Carlisle, Pennsylvania,
Uh huh.
and he came to visit me once, and then I went to see him again in my 20s, and then that's the last time I saw him. Um, but like he wrote these elaborate erotic tales about us as vampires. He sent me a vial of his blood one time. He very much wanted to be a vampire, and he tried to convince me when I graduated from high school to move to New York City and go to school there. I would like to think that not being accepted to a program at NYU is probably why I'm still alive today.
Yeah.
I mean, I never went to see him by myself. Like, I always had a friend with me. You know, I was never alone with him.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, there's that weird, like, you know, this is dangerous. I'm aware, but I'm going to go check it out anyway. And I feel like that's the aspect of the autobiographical in a lot of my stuff.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there are, you know, my characters are women who are in situations where they're like clearly aware that something is up with whoever they're dealing with, and they still go ahead and check it out. Because, you know, curiosity can get the best of us sometimes. Maybe it won't end in death. Maybe there won't be tragedy. But it's still that desire to do the scary thing. To do the scary thing.
Wow. That's wild.
Yeah.
What was it like writing that character into the book?
That was super cathartic because I had to unpack a lot of things for myself. Oddly enough, connecting with that person opened up a lot of other doorways for me and forced me to explore some other things, different types of music, different ways of seeing myself. It pushed me to do the scary things more. So, you know, I would hitchhike all the time as a teenager, which was super dumb, but I met people that I would not have met otherwise, which leads to more interesting stories, right? So, you know, if you don't go out and explore the world, even the scary parts of it, you're not going to know. You won't know.
Yeah.
I like to know.
So, what happened to him? Do you know?
I don't. Around the time that I finished writing the book, I tried to track him down, and was unable to do that. I have no idea whatever happened to him. But I unearthed a bunch of his letters, some photos. I think at some point I'd probably thrown out the vial of blood. So I couldn't do that. But it was interesting to think about how this real potential monster influenced this character in my novel. And weirdly enough, even though I should know better, there's still a fondness for this person because, again, he opened my eyes to things that I would not have been aware of otherwise.
Yeah, I guess that's like the complex thing. Do you ever miss that time of your life?
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like in some ways I was freer to do crazier, dumber things, scarier things, and not have to worry about the consequences as much. I didn't necessarily think of myself as like immortal, but you know, when you're young, the idea of real death is not always like so close, at least not to you. But I feel like I was constantly putting myself in situations where I was like flirting with death. And I'm not 100% sure what that's about. I mean, I've had experiences with things that go bump in the night. But I'm not sure why death has always kind of been in the background of my brain. But it's always taken up space there for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. What scares you?
What scares me? Oh my.
Yeah.
Um, the next election? I don't know.
Real things.
Yeah, real things. Real things scare me. Extreme poverty, homelessness, not having control of my physical and mental health. I don't know. A couple of weeks ago, I was, doing something a little witchy and left a candle burning overnight, and purely by chance, I managed to not burn the house down. So, getting distracted and creating catastrophe because my brain doesn't think like, oh, you should probably blow that out, or make sure the stove is off, or
Yeah.
when I lock the front door. Being a victim of my own distracted brain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm glad you didn't burn the house down.
Yeah.
And yeah, do you ever this is something that comes up for me every time I see either a writer, filmmaker, anyone who works in horror, is something my mom used to always tell me when I first started writing is write something happy. write good things, because where else you're gonna bring all that bad thing to your life.
Right.
Does that thought ever cross your mind as a horror writer? Like, am I sort of conjuring these things that I'm writing?
I do think about that sometimes. It's difficult. I don't know. It's difficult for me to write about happy things. And I'm not really sure what that's about. I remember I took a journalism class as an undergrad.
Uh-huh.
And the stories that I wanted to write about were like upsetting everyone else in the classroom. Okay. I wanted to write about real terrible things that were happening in the world around us. I wasn't making them up. There were things that were like readily available news stories about real life. And everybody in my class, I mean, this is like a middle of nowhere cow pasture college. And everybody else wanted to write like, feel good hometown hero stories. And I was called on the carpet in front of the entire class by the instructor. And she was like, doom and gloom. Everything that you write has doom and gloom in it. And I was like, because that's real life.
Yeah. Like, why is this a thing in a journalism class? I don't.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts about that. But yeah, this is like, this is pre-Karen era, but this woman was like 100% a Karen, and she was not having it that I was going to try to upset everybody in the classroom by talking about real things like racism and sexism and, child predators or whatever. I was not going to bring down the feeling of the classroom by talking about things that were actually happening in the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's difficult for me to write a happy story. I think happy things happen in my stories, but they're not necessarily going to have a happy ending. And which is problematic if I'm writing a series that's like under the umbrella of romance, because that's, for a lot of people who read romance, that's the expectation. You know, I'm working towards this happily ever after, right?
Yeah.
And in theory, that's what I'm doing. And oh my God, I hope that's what I do. I'm going to try really hard to make that happen. It probably won't happen the first time I write that ending of that fifth book, because my inner voice is going to be like, no, that's ridiculous. That's not really how things go in the world. People don't have their happily ever after. It's more struggle. It's more this. But I'm going to have to quiet that voice to make the ending conform more with the expectations of romance writers and readers. And that's fine. But I'm going to fight it. I know I am. I'm going to fight it. We're going to be having drinks. And I'm going to be like, I can't write the end of this damn book, right? Because...
And I'll be like, another round, bartender.
Exactly.
Like, going back to your thing of like, you're constantly finding yourself in almost like death taunting, situations.
Right.
Have you had experience like seeing death?
Yeah. Yeah. So I, in theory, was raised in a haunted house. My grandparents' house was haunted.
That was also in Pennsylvania.
Yes, that's in Walnut Bottom, Pennsylvania. And that house is still there. I don't know who the current owners are, but the people who took over the house after my grandparents passed away and we sold it, were having experiences too. And they kept showing up at my aunt's house asking questions about it. Like, did something terrible happen here? Did, whatever. And so my aunt wouldn't like immediately respond. She would just be like, well, what do you mean? Tell me what tell me what you're experiencing, whatever. As far as we all know, we don't know if something happened there. Okay. But it was just always haunted. And it's a family experience. So it's not just one of us or two of us. Everyone had some sort of experience in that household. I feel like maybe it's because I was younger, or maybe I'm just more open to seeing things, or whatever. I feel like I saw more than the other people in the family. But everyone agrees that they saw at least one particular ghost. And that one particular ghost was called the Tall Man. And the Tall Man was like a black shadow. So it's not like you'd see a full-bodied apparition like people describe or whatever. But you would just see this shadow looming in the corner, wearing a stovepipe hat. So it's like, is this Abe Lincoln? What the hell? What's going on? So definitely not Abe Lincoln. But what's really weird about it is no one had any sense of who this was, why this was happening, why people were seeing it in the house, because there's no way of tracing it back to an origin story. Mm-hmm. We know that the house had belonged to a man by the name of William Buffman a long time ago. That the house at some point functioned as a railway stop. And it might have been a small store, like a grocery store at one point. But ever since my grandparents bought it, it functioned as a house. It was a residence. And, they added some things onto the house. There was a creepy attic. There was a root cellar. So, not like a basement, but like a set of rickety wooden stairs that go down into a dirt floor basement that, where, the house is like this stuff, it's like this stuff of horror films. But like during the daytime, it looked like any other house, right? But I remember, I guess the first time I knew that something was up in the house was one of my first birthday parties. And I remember being at the birthday party, and I remember all the people who were at the birthday party. And I was talking about the birthday party maybe a few days later, and was saying, oh, I'm so glad that this person was there. And, and yeah, I remember so-and-so was there. And, and Grandma Fail was there. Okay. Well, Grandma Fail, I only saw Grandma Fail in pictures because Grandma Fail was dead long before I was born. But in my young mind, I didn't understand that, I guess. And she was there at my birthday party. I saw her sitting in a chair with the other guests.
Wow.
And when I told the adults in the household that she was there, like, well, that's not possible. That doesn't sound right. She wasn't there. And I was like, yeah, she was sitting right there. And I went and got a picture. And I was like, yeah, this woman right here, she was sitting in the room. And then they were all freaked out about it because clearly that is a dead
She's
woman.
in the photo.
Right. And so, like, I don't know. So I feel like that was my first indication that something was up with the house.
How did you feel when people said, but she's dead?
I feel like initially I probably didn't believe them. Mainly because I don't know, there were always scary things happening around the house, like scary stories. Like my grandmother delighted in scaring the crap out of people. She was constantly telling ghost stories or singing spooky ass songs. Like I didn't get nursery rhymes. I got, have you seen the ghost of John? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's like she delighted in telling those stories. And so it's like just a natural part of life. Like, what did we watch on Saturday afternoon? Hitchcock movies. What's on middle of the day in the afternoon? Oh, we're watching Dark Shadows. Okay. So it's just like the natural background of things. So for someone to tell me that I'd seen a dead person at my birthday party was like, nah, that's not true. You guys are just messing with me. That can't be true. But now I realize that could not have possibly have been there. I mean, she was there because I saw her. But yeah, she was a ghost.
Do you still have that photo?
I do not have that photo. I do not have that photo. But some of the other things that occur to me is when I was a kid playing around the house, all kids have imaginary friends or, and, now I realize that, I'm a little neurospicy. And so I talk to myself anyway. But I feel like even though I spent a lot of time alone as a kid, I feel like I have memories of having conversations with people that may or may not have actually been there. So, and the reason I say this is because, growing up, there was agreement that there was like one ghost in the house, right? Mm-hmm. That's the one that everybody saw. And everybody had a story about how they interacted with that ghost. And that was the tall man, that weird shadow in the corner, right? Everybody had that story. But nobody ever talked about any other ghosts. But I feel like I saw other ghosts around the house. When the people who bought my grandparents' house talked to my aunt about the things that they were seeing. They were seeing more ghosts around the house. They were seeing people in Civil War uniforms. And that stretch of road goes directly into Gettysburg. It's like there are historical markers for that being the path to Gettysburg. So that's possible. I don't remember seeing soldiers as a kid, but I remember seeing other people outside or inside the house that should not have been there. I remember shortly after my grandparents' cat passed away. It was a Siamese cat, one of the old world ones with the really like pointy faces. After she died, I kept hearing her going up and down the stairs. Sometimes I would swear I saw her out of the corner of my eye. I still see cats out of the corner of my eye. I see them a lot. Like, there are times when I'm pretty sure that I'm like, maybe I'm going crazy, but like, I see cats out of the corner of my eye all the time. I only had one cat, and he can't possibly be in all the places all the time, right?
I mean, they try.
They try. Yeah, they sure do. They sure do. So I don't know. I'm not sure how to feel about that. When we were clearing out my grandparents' house, my aunt and uncle stayed in the house overnight one night. And they went up to bed on the second floor. And right as they were getting settled, about to turn out the light, they heard all of this noise downstairs from like where the kitchen is located. Mm-hmm. It sounded like a party. Like there were people just making all kinds of noise, like a crowd of people making noise. So my uncle gets out of bed because he's thinking people have broken into the house because they know that my grandparents aren't there anymore. And he goes down fully prepared to call the police or whatever. The minute that his feet hit the bottom of the staircase, complete silence. There's no one in the house. No one. So I would like to believe that house has a lot more going on in it than we might think.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it.
Because even though most people in the family are only aware of one ghost, some people see more ghosts. And I feel like I saw more ghosts growing up there.
Yeah.
When they cleared out the house in the attic, there was this huge chest, this like a steamer chest, right? And no one knew who it belonged to. It's like it had just always kind of been there. And so my aunt took it to her house to see if they could maybe like salvage it, figure out like what the origin of it was, whatever. And the night that they brought it to the house, it started making all these weird noises, like these whispering noises.
Oh no.
And they saw the tall man.
No.
So my uncle took it outside and burned it the next day because there was no way he was going to have that around his house.
Yeah.
Because, he'd heard the stories too, because we all have stories about the tall man. So in this case, at least one of the things haunting the house was attached to that chest that had just always been in the attic. I don't know.
I thought you're not supposed to burn these things. I don't know. I watch too much TV.
Right. Well, the Winchesters would tell you to definitely burn it. Definitely. Yeah. You should definitely burn it. Yeah. So that's kind of like my my childhood introduction to hauntings. But I've had other experiences too. When I was a junior in college, I lived in Hull, England, for about a year, and I was spending the night at my boyfriend's, and he lived in this converted Victorian house. So it was like a huge, like 3 or 4 story house.
Yeah.
And he lived in one of the attic apartments. And I'm laying in bed one night. He's sound asleep. I can't get to sleep. And I happen to look up and notice that there's someone walking between the living room or kitchen and the bathroom. And I'm, I'm laying where I'm looking directly at the bedroom door, which is open. It's not completely wide open, but it's open enough that I see someone walking back and forth. And I panic because, again, your first thought is someone's in the house. Someone broke into the house. What is going on? And so I try to wake him up without making too much noise. And I'm like, hey, I think someone's in the house. And about the time I say that, there's suddenly no one there. I'm like, great, now he's going to think that I'm crazy. So I tell him what I've seen. And he's like, oh, that's just Mr. So-and-so. He used to live here. And I'm like, what? And he's like, oh, yeah, he used to live here. He used to rent this place. And he's like, I guess he died here. I'm like, oh my God. Okay. So great. So I'm not crazy. And you're validating the fact that I just saw someone walking back and forth. I'm like, well, why? And it was like really early in the morning. And I'm like, well, what is that? He's like, I think he's getting ready for work. I think he thinks he's getting ready for work. I'm like, oh my God, okay. All right. I'll accept it. But it scared the shit out of me because I really thought that someone was in the apartment. But weirdly enough, I felt relieved that it was just a ghost.
It's like, oh, it's not a person. It's a ghost.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Wow. I don't know if you could properly answer this, but like growing up around dead people for so long and, extending your life and even in your writing and stuff. How do you even see death?
Wow, that is a fascinating question. So how do I see death? I think it varies. I don't know that I'm necessarily afraid of death. There have been a lot of people in my life who've been very afraid of death. My father was very afraid of death. To the point where he couldn't be in the same room if I was watching certain horror films. Like he couldn't, like if my mother and I wanted to watch The Exorcist or something like that, he could not be in the same room. He had to go in another room and close the door because he just couldn't stand it. And I feel like he spent a lot of his life worrying about his death, which is crazy to me because we all have to face it at some point. We don't know how or when, or what the circumstances are going to be like. But it's a fact. It's just a fact of our lives. It's the natural conclusion of our life. And so I feel like I've tried to not be afraid of that time. I don't know how I'm going to feel in that moment. I have no way of knowing.
Sure.
I don't even know if I'm going to be conscious when it happens. Like, I don't know. There's no way of knowing. But I think that my acceptance of it, or my attempt at acceptance, because of the things that I enjoy reading, the types of movies that I like, the fact that I, even as a kid was like spending, my afternoon at the library combing through books on the occult, because I'm fascinated by the concept of death. I started learning about Egypt and their burial processes, and the fact that they were trying to take things with them into the afterlife. Like, all of that stuff has fascinated me since I was a kid. And I think it has been my way of preparing for the inevitable, trying to understand it as much as possible so that it isn't scary, it isn't terrifying. But again, I don't know how I'm going to be in
Yeah.
that moment, or if I
Yeah.
find out that I'm headed in that direction without any sort of way of stopping it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Um, that was an amazing answer. I think it's a good time for us to wrap up. Thank you for the incredible stories. Um, wow. I can't wait to go drinking with you again.
I know, I'm excited too.
um, once again, to all the listeners and viewers out there, this was Michelle Renee Lane here, based here in Pittsburgh, where I am. Dear friend and just a cool human being. Please pick up her work. And thank you again for joining us for another fascinating episode of Are You There, Ghost? It's me, Chiwan. We look forward to seeing you again. Peace out.